Every story leaves something behind. A whisper. A shadow. A question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully. Because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. Our first story tonight was sent in by a night shift clerk who worked at a gas station in rural Kansas. What he describes is short, but the detail about the security footage is what really unsettled me. The woman at pump 4 hadn't moved in over 20 minutes. I only noticed because I'd been watching the security monitors while the other clerk was on break, and something about the way she stood there, perfectly still, hand on the nozzle, just didn't sit right. This was a Conoco station off Route 54 in southern Kansas. Middle of nowhere. The kind of place where the nearest house is a 10-minute drive and the only light for miles is the buzzing fluorescent canopy over the pumps. It was November, maybe 35 degrees outside, and a thin fog had settled low across the fields on either side of the road. The kind of night where the silence has a weight to it. I checked the monitor again. She was still there. Same position. Her car was a dark sedan, maybe a Camry, and it was parked crooked across the pump island like she'd pulled in too fast. The gas cap was open, but when I looked closer at the screen, I realized the nozzle wasn't even in the car. She was just holding it at her side, pointed at the ground. I figured maybe she was on the phone or having some kind of moment, so I keyed the intercom and asked if she needed help. No response. She didn't flinch. Didn't look toward the speaker. Nothing. I put on my jacket and walked outside. The cold hit me immediately, and so did the quiet. No cars on the highway. No wind. Just the electric hum of the canopy lights and my shoes on the concrete. As I got closer, I called out to her. "Ma'am, are you okay?" She was facing away from me, toward the road. She was wearing a thin dress, no coat, which was strange for the temperature. Her hair was dark and hung straight down past her shoulders. I noticed her feet. She wasn't wearing shoes. Her bare feet were on the concrete, and they looked pale, almost blue. I stopped about 10 feet away. Something told me not to get closer. I said again, louder this time, "Ma'am, do you need me to call someone?" And then she turned her head. Not her body. Just her head, slowly, maybe halfway toward me. I couldn't see her face clearly because the light was hitting her from above and her hair covered most of it. But I could see her mouth. It was open. Not like she was about to speak. It was just, open. Wide. Like her jaw was slack. I took a step back. I told her I was going to call someone for her and I turned around and walked back inside. I didn't run, but I wanted to. I locked the door and picked up the phone to call the police non-emergency line. It took maybe 90 seconds to explain the situation. When I looked back at the monitor, pump 4 was empty. The car was gone. The nozzle was hanging off the pump, swinging slightly like it had just been dropped. I checked the transaction log. No purchase had been made at pump 4 that night. The pump had never been activated. I pulled up the camera footage from the last hour and scrubbed through it. The car was never there. The woman was never there. The footage just showed an empty pump island the entire time. I quit 2 weeks later. Not because of that night specifically, but because every shift after, I couldn't stop watching pump 4 on the monitor. And twice, just for a second, I thought I saw her again. That one is hard to explain away, and honestly I'm not sure I want to try. The next story is different though. This one is very real, very human, and somehow that makes it worse. This story was submitted by someone who worked the graveyard shift at a gas station in East Texas. He asked me not to use his real name. After hearing what happened, I understand why. The door to the stockroom locked from the outside, and I didn't realize that until I heard the click. I turned the handle and it didn't move. That's when I heard footsteps in the store, slow and deliberate, and I knew I was the only employee on shift. I worked at a Shell station in rural East Texas, one of those old ones with the stockroom built as a separate concrete block behind the register counter. No windows in there. Just shelves of cigarette cartons, energy drinks, and a mop bucket that always smelled like bleach. The light was a single bulb on a pull chain. It was around 1 in the morning, dead of night, and the last customer I'd rung up had been maybe 40 minutes prior. I'd gone to the stockroom to grab a sleeve of cups for the coffee station. The door had been propped open with a rubber wedge like it always was. But when it shut behind me and I heard that lock turn, the wedge was gone. Someone had moved it and closed the door while I was inside. I banged on the door and yelled. The footsteps stopped. Then I heard the register drawer open. The distinct sound of the cash tray being pulled out, the rattle of coins. I figured it was a robbery. Someone had waited for me to go in the back and locked me in. That was terrifying enough. But then the footsteps came toward the stockroom door and stopped right on the other side. I went quiet. I could hear breathing. Slow, calm breathing. And then a voice, very low, almost a whisper, said my name. My actual name. Not the name on my tag. My full first name. Nobody at that job called me by my full name. I went by a nickname. I hadn't told anyone they're my real name. I backed away from the door. The breathing continued. Then he said something else. He said, "I've been watching you close up alone." He said it like it was a normal thing to say. Like he was telling me about the weather. Then he said, "You always prop this door open. Every night." The handle jiggled. Not like he was trying to open it. More like he was testing it. Making sure it was locked. Making sure I couldn't get out. I called 911 from my cell phone. I whispered the address and told them someone had locked me in and was inside the store. The operator told me to stay on the line. The man outside the door didn't say anything else. But he didn't leave either. I could hear him breathing for another 3 or 4 minutes. Then the footsteps moved away, and I heard the front door chime. Police arrived in about 12 minutes. They found the stockroom door still locked. The cash drawer was on the counter, emptied. The rubber wedge was sitting on top of the register, placed neatly in the center, like it was left there for me to find. The security camera had been spray-painted black. Not that night. The officers said the paint was dry. It had been done days ago. Maybe longer. Which means he'd been preparing this and I'd been working under a dead camera without knowing it. They never caught him. They pulled prints off the door handle and the wedge and got nothing back. No match in any system. My manager offered me day shifts after that, but I couldn't walk into that stockroom again without my chest tightening. I quit the next month. The thing that I keep coming back to is my name. I never wore my full name anywhere. It wasn't on any social media connected to that job. He knew it. That means he knew me from somewhere else, or he'd gone further than just watching me lock up. And I still don't know which is worse. I don't think I need to tell you why that one bothers me, the level of planning, the patience, the fact that he was never identified. But this last story is the one that stuck with me long after I finished reading it. It was sent in by a gas station attendant in Missouri, and it involves something he found in the bathroom wall. There was blood on the bathroom floor when I went to clean it, and it was fresh. Not a lot. Just a thin smear leading from the base of the toilet to the wall, like something had been dragged. This was a BP station just outside of Rolla, Missouri, right off I-44. The bathroom was external, around the side of the building, one of those single-occupancy ones with a heavy metal door and a lock that barely worked. It smelled the way those bathrooms always smell, like old urine and industrial soap. It was February, freezing, and the parking lot was empty except for my car and the overnight delivery truck that had come and gone an hour before. I was alone. I stared at the blood for a second. I thought maybe someone had a nosebleed or cut themselves. But the smear pattern was wrong. It went toward the wall, and when I followed it, I noticed the base of the wall panel was slightly separated from the floor. There was a gap, maybe 2 inches, where the prefab panel met the concrete foundation. I crouched down and shined my phone light into it. I could see insulation. And past the insulation, there was a space. A crawlspace between the bathroom wall and the exterior brick. I didn't think much of it. Old buildings have gaps. Then I saw the fingernail. A human fingernail, torn off, sitting in the gap between the wall and the floor. It had blood on the root end. I stood up fast. My first thought was someone had gotten hurt and left. My second thought was to call my manager. But before I could, I heard something inside the wall. A shifting sound. Like fabric dragging against insulation. It was subtle, and if the room hadn't been dead silent, I would have missed it. I stopped breathing. I listened. It came again. A slow, deliberate movement behind the wall panel. Not an animal. Too controlled. Too rhythmic. Like someone adjusting their position. I backed toward the door. I didn't say anything. I didn't want whoever or whatever was in that wall to know I'd heard them. My hand found the door handle and I pulled it open and stepped outside into the cold. I walked fast around the building and went straight inside the store and locked the front door. I called 911 and told them what I found. I told them about the blood, the fingernail, the sound. They sent 2 units. When the officers went to check the bathroom, the blood was still there. The fingernail was still there. But when they pulled the wall panel away from the base, the crawlspace was empty. It was about 3 feet wide and ran the full length of the bathroom wall, tall enough for someone to sit upright. There was a blanket in there. A dirty blanket, balled up in the corner. And next to it, a plastic bag with food wrappers, a water bottle, and a phone charger with no phone. Someone had been living in the wall of that bathroom. The officers said from the amount of wrappers, it could have been days. Maybe longer. The blood and the fingernail suggested they'd pried the panel open from the inside and it had cost them. They found scratch marks on the interior side of the panel, dozens of them, like someone had been clawing at it repeatedly. They checked the security cameras, but the bathroom was around the corner from any camera angle. No footage. No identification. The blanket was sent for testing but I never heard the results. I think about the timing a lot. I cleaned that bathroom every night at the same time. Whoever was in there knew my schedule. They heard me come in every single night. They were inches from me in the dark while I mopped the floor. They listened to me. They breathed the same air through that gap in the wall. And the part that really gets to me, the part one can't stop thinking about, is the phone charger. There was no outlet in that crawlspace. The nearest outlet was inside the bathroom. Which means at some point, while the bathroom was unlocked and accessible, they came out. They plugged in. They were in the room. Maybe while I was on the other side of the building. Maybe while I was 10 feet away behind the counter. I transferred to a different location the following week. But some nights I still think about what would have happened if I hadn't seen the blood. How many more nights I would have walked into that bathroom alone, cleaned the floor, turned off the light, and never known that someone was sitting in the wall, perfectly still, waiting in the dark. And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time. Keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.